Hello and welcome to the Joe Cannon Health Podcast. I am Joe Cannon and this is episode number 12. In today's episode, I want to talk about why you should exercise more. And while you're probably saying to yourself, yeah, I know I should exercise more, what I want to do here is cover 9 different things about exercise that I think most people probably don't know. And I think these may surprise some of you. Hopefully they do. 1 or 2 of them surprised me as I delved more into it. So I think this will be very interesting. And I think you might be surprised at some of the things I have to say. But before we get started, let me do a little housekeeping. And the first thing I want to do is thank AllieCat3160 for her 5-star review on Apple Podcast. She writes, Joe Cannon is a great podcast host, thank you very much, and presents scientific facts in an easy to understand way. I can't wait for more episodes. Hey, that's like the best thing that anybody said to me all week. So I really appreciate that. I honestly, with the exception of a few people, I don't know who everybody listens to me. So I'm really glad when I get feedback like that. It just makes me want to do more episodes, and I got a lot more episodes in the bucket anyway. So yeah, nothing to worry about. I got plenty more that I'm going to be talking about in the near and not so near future. In addition to that, I got an email recently that kind of made me think a little bit. And the email basically went like this. Hey, Joe, love your website. Podcast is great. How can I support it? And I thought about that for a while, and I know some podcasts actually have mechanisms in place, and different ways to compensate them and all that stuff. I don't have anything like that in place as of right now. So what I would say is support the podcast is keep doing what you're already doing. I love the 5-star reviews in Apple Podcasts. That's really great. Share the podcast not only with your friends, tell your friends about it, but post links on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. I think all that's going to help. Share my websites. My websites are joe-cannon.com and supplementclarity.com. Feel free to leave comments on those websites as well. Those comments actually do get indexed by, search engines. And it's interesting, I was literally talking about this about a week or so ago, and sometimes people find me not by what I write on my website, but it's by the questions people actually ask me on the website. So it's very interesting. So feel free to do any of that. All that, definitely helps me out a whole bunch. And I can't thank you enough for you doing any of that for me. So with having said all that, now let's move away from this for right now, and let me get to the main topic of the week. Oh, I forgot about that. Before we do that, let's talk about the myth of the week, because we can't do an episode without doing the myth of the week. And this one's actually a question I was asked about a week ago. I was teaching a sports nutrition class at the AAAI ISMA fitness convention in Baltimore, Maryland, and a person came up to me at lunchtime and asked me what I thought about the alkaline diet. The alkaline diet's been around a long time, and the premise behind the diet is that if you eat certain foods, they will alter the acidity, alkalinity, if you will, of the body, and this will promote greater health. Well, I've heard of the alkaline diet. It's been out a million years, and I honestly don't have a problem with it per se, except by the premise that people think it works by. So what is it? So we can't talk about the alkaline diet without talking about the pH of the body. The pH is an acidity alkalinity scale. It's a sciencey concept, but it's a scale that goes from 0 to 14. 0 is really, really acidic, and 14 is really, really alkaline, like bleach. So 0 is like sulfuric acid, and 14 is like bleach. So when we talk about the alkalinity of the body, we really have to talk about what part of the body are we talking about. Different parts of the body have different degrees of acidity and alkalinity. For instance, the stomach is around 1, 1.5, 2, really acidic. Makes sense. It's got to digest the food we eat. The skin has a pH of around, maybe around 4, 5, something like that. A little bit less acid, but still a little bit on the acid side. And that makes sense because it wants to protect us from invading bacteria from penetrating the skin. The pH of the blood, however, is about 7.4, 7.36, whatever. 7 is neutral. And so the higher the number, the more alkaline it is. The blood is about 7.4, more or less. That means the blood is already kind of alkaline. And it turns out that you really can't change significantly the acidity or alkalinity of the blood very much, nor should we want to. The body is very good at maintaining that 7.4, 7.36 pH of the blood. Any significant deviation from this that lasts long enough could be very bad for us. When I say bad, I mean, pack your bags, you got to go to the hospital. That's how serious it is, and it actually be very, very bad for us. I always remember a chemistry teacher in college saying that if we could not maintain the pH of our blood, a glass of orange juice would kill us. That is how serious the body takes maintaining that normal pH. Now, if we look at the foods, however, that are included in the alkaline diet, these are foods you think of as healthy. They include fruits and veggies, soy, beans, seeds. These are traditionally considered healthy foods. The alkaline diet usually avoids things like, junk food, processed foods. Most grains are usually avoided also. They're debatable what do you think about them. But, eggs, dairy, red meat. So it kind of pushes away those other foods and puts the emphasis on, again, more fruits, more veggies, more colorful foods, etc. So if we look at that, we can say that the alkaline diet is a healthy diet and will promote health. It really will, but not because it's significantly altering the pH of the blood. It's just that you're eating a lot of colorful foods. They have a lot of phytonutrients, and those phytonutrients and fiber and water do a lot of things for us to help us stay healthy. So the bottom line of this myth, it's not really a myth. The alkaline diet, I think, is a healthy diet for most people, but that's not really because it's altering the pH of the body in any way significantly. The body maintains its pH for a reason, to keep us healthy. The alkaline diet's okay because it's got a lot of pretty good foods in it. So that's kind of the myth of the week. Hopefully that clears it up. If you've got any myths you want me to address in future episodes, feel free to drop me an email at either one of my websites, joe-cannon.com. or supplementclarity.com. We'll leave the myth of the week alone for right now. Again, I've got another one in store for next week's episode, so I'll keep you in pins and needles till we talk about that one. But for the remainder of our time together this week, I want to talk about some of the benefits of exercise you may not be aware of. We have all heard that exercise is good for us. We know that exercise lowers the risk of heart disease, cancer, stroke, it does all that good stuff. And we've heard this a lot on TV, radio, internet, etc. But it's my opinion that when you're trying to get people to do something, to buy into something, that they usually it works better when you focus on the benefits of something. Just telling people you got to exercise and, talk about something amorphous they're not used to, hearing, like, oh, heart disease, what's that? People don't really even understand heart disease in mainstream. They just heard about it. It's a complicated disorder, as is cancer and as is strokes. But if you focus on the benefits of exercise, I think this will help people adhere to a more healthy lifestyle. So what I've got for you here are 9 different benefits of exercise. Some of them I think you may not have heard of before. Some of them you may have. It depends. And what I want to do is just go through them 1 through 9, and hopefully by the end of this episode, you've learned something that maybe you hadn't heard of before. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Now, the very first thing I want to talk about is potentially the sexiest thing that exercise does. It does a lot of cool stuff, but this one is very impressive, okay? And it involves what is called the epigenome. The epigenome refers to how our environment can alter our genetic material, change our genes, turn off good genes, turn on good genes. And these are called epigenetic changes. Studies are starting to pour in that show that how we live our life can impact our genetic material. Again, turning on good genes, turning off bad genes. And these are some of the ways in which we think that exercise can help lower the risk of different diseases by altering the function of certain genes. Genes that might kick in, for instance, and cause cancer are subdued, versus other genes which may inhibit cancer growth are turned on. And this is not just something that we're born with. Apparently, we have the power to alter how our genes work. And this is the science of epigenetics. And it's a different branch of genetics than you may be familiar with. Genetics being, the study of our DNA, that spiral staircase inside our cells that contains our chromosomes, our genes, if you will. Very complicated. We've got about almost 6 feet of DNA in just about every cell of our body. Again, really complicated. And about 10 years ago, this epigenetic aspect of biology started to come out. And we're still trying to uncover how it works and how to influence it. But what we know is that exercise can affect the epigenome, and when by doing so, making the certain genes more prolific and certain other genes less prolific, so they be subdued. And even it turns out the contraction of our muscles during exercise appear to release compounds, which again can influence these healthy gene changes. Now, if you've heard of this before, you may have come across a word called methylation. And methylation refers to the addition or subtraction of methyl groups. Methyl groups are CH3 groups. It's a chemistry term. Again, not relevant for most of us, but it appears that by adding or subtracting methyl groups is one of the ways in which we can alter our genes, turn on good genes, turn off bad genes, for instance, and exercise does seem to play a role in this. You may have heard of certain supplements, for instance, that have a methyl version, for instance, methylfolate or methyl B12. And the idea behind some of these versions of the vitamins is the methyl form might be better, and one of the ways it might be better is by providing methyl groups. Well, really, it turns out that you and I make methyl groups. Our body's pretty good at making them, and we make them as we use them, and we do what we want with them. And I wanted to bring up the methylation idea because when I've read other magazine articles, I've heard of methylation before, and I've seen it mentioned, and it sounds, really wise and smart. I just wanted to bring it up because epigenetics are much more complicated than simple methylation. And the other reason I wanted to bring this up is that it turns out that when exercise affects the epigenome, one of the ways it does this is by removing methyl groups. It promotes what's called a hypomethylation of genes. It removes methylation products, and by doing so, this sometimes turns off bad genes, allowing other genes to flourish. So again, I want to bring that up because sometimes we hook on what's maybe the common denominator, at least what we think is the common denominator of things, and the methylation idea is getting a lot of publicity. It is much more complicated than simply that. And remember that even removing methyl groups can have a positive effect in the body. And again, we don't necessarily need to be eating methyl groups in terms of dietary supplements. We do make methyl groups on an ongoing basis. So don't worry about that. The body's pretty good at doing what it needs to with these methyl groups. And again, if you're thinking, what is a methyl group? Think of it as a light switch. You switch on and the light goes on. You flip it down and the light switch goes off. That's kind of how these methyl groups work. They can either turn on certain things or turn off certain things. And the interesting part about epigenetics is that these changes appear to show up pretty darn fast. There is evidence that even a single exercise session, just one regular little 45-minute exercise session, can cause dramatic changes in the epigenome for the better. So this is, again, not something you have to do for like 6 months, a year, 5 years before you see these changes. They appear to start kicking in pretty darn fast. And that is, again, very, very sexy in my book. And the other thing I think is even more interesting about epigenetics is that, again, it not only gives us the ability to have some control over our genome, but maybe also our descendants. Most of the evidence for this seems to come from laboratory animals of rats and mice. Makes sense. They don't live as long as we do. But when you take, say, mice and you give them a lot of good food and exercise and sunlight and a happy little environment, they have epigenetic changes and they are healthy mice. Well, it turns out that when they have baby mice, those baby mice are also healthier. Conversely, when you take other mice and you give them a bad diet and no exercise and no light and, not a fun time, obviously, there are some bad epigenetic changes that kick in. And when those mice give birth to baby mice, turns out those mice are not as healthy. This appears to give rise to what is sometimes called the epigenetic memory. The epigenetic memory. Apparently, our genome remembers what it's like to be healthy or not healthy, and it seems to pass some of this stuff on to our descendants. That I find very empowering, because not only can we affect maybe our own genetic material to a degree, but also our descendants' genetics as well. And that's actually very empowering and very cool in my book. We don't really think about too much. We've heard for years, well, if you want to live a long life and be healthy, pick your parents well. That's the old saying. Epigenetics appears to say to us, not so fast. You have control over your own DNA genetics as well, and this can also play a role in your descendants' health as well. So again, getting exercise, eating well, being happy, and not smoking and drinking to excess and all that stuff, that can also not only help our own genetic material right now, but maybe even down the road for our descendants. So very, very cool. Epigenetic. If you want to learn more, just Google or Bing epigenetics, and you'll see all kinds of stuff popping up on it. Very complicated. We don't totally understand it yet. And again, a lot of the research does come from, cell cultures and laboratory animal research, but there is some data on humans. It's not as much as I'd like, again, because we've only really been aware of this for about a decade or so. But this is one of the most interesting aspects of biology to come down the road in a very long time. And I predict that over time, you're going to be hearing much more about epigenetics in the coming future. Now, if we leave this alone for a little while and let's jump over to number 2 in my top 9 list of healthy benefits of exercise most people are not aware of. And this is the topic of mitochondria health, the mitochondria. Now, if you've never heard the term mitochondria before, I'd bet you probably have, because it gets covered in every biology class, whether it's college or high school or junior high school. The mitochondria, you've probably heard it called the powerhouses of the cell. The powerhouses of the cell. And biology teachers like to call them that because the mitochondria basically, they burn fat, they burn carbs, and they make these foodstuffs into energy. So they make energy. Again, these mitochondria are very, very potent energy producers in the cell. They're often called powerhouses. However, I like to call them batteries because that's really more akin to what they really are. Mitochondria are like little fat-burning batteries that are inside your cells. Now, it turns out that there are actually some vitamins out there that are touted to promote cellular health and improve the mitochondria health. If you flash back to episode number 8, we talked about one of them. It's a version of niacin called nicotinamide riboside. And while there is some intriguing evidence on that particular vitamin, I want you to know that exercise will also increase the health of the mitochondria. Turns out that exercise can make your mitochondria not only bigger, but you'll make more mitochondria. People who exercise have more mitochondria and bigger mitochondria in their muscles than people who don't exercise at all. So the fancy smarty pants term for this is exercise enhances mitochondrial biogenesis. It helps us form and make new mitochondria. The more mitochondria you have, the more energy you can make, the better you are at burning fat during exercise, as a matter of fact. And it's funny that sometimes people say to me, Joe, I just started an exercise program, a few weeks ago. I have so much more energy now. Could one of those reasons why they have more energy be because they're now starting to make more mitochondria, and those mitochondria are starting to become more numerous? Perhaps it's a possibility that could be one reason. There is evidence that even a single one exercise session can start to change mitochondria for the better. You start to see changes in the mitochondria even after a single session of exercise. A single 30, 45, 60-minute exercise session will start this process going where you start ramping up the number and the size of your mitochondria. Very, very interesting. And again, to see even more changes, only 7 days. 7 days of endurance exercise like walking, biking, swimming, whatever, Remember, anything you can do for a long time is endurance. Even 7 days of endurance exercise, you can actually see more changes in these mitochondria. So the changes in the mitochondrial DNA, mitochondria has its own DNA as well, separate from ours, which is very interesting. But again, it doesn't take a lot to see these changes occur. And again, exercise is free. You don't need any expensive vitamins to increase mitochondrial biogenesis, etc. A simple little 1 hour walk or half an hour walk a few times a week is all you need to do. So mitochondria, very, very neat. Again, I think a lot of people probably heard about it in biology class at some point, maybe in school, and then forgot about it. It's starting to get some publicity in the world of supplements these days. I just want you to realize that exercise is a very potent producer of mitochondria size and number. You will see more mitochondria in the muscles, for instance, of a marathon runner, for instance. Aerobic exercise is very good at producing mitochondria, as is strength training. The way, probably not powerlifting so much where you lift a really heavy weight one time, but, traditional strength training like people you see in the gym, they may be doing 12 reps of the bench press and 12 reps of the leg press or something like that. That type of resistance training has an aerobic component to it, and it will also improve mitochondrial size, mitochondrial number as well. Now, conversely, inactivity, not doing anything, very bad for mitochondria, because when you're not exercising regularly, when you're not moving regularly, your body takes the path of least resistance. And it's going to say, well, I guess I don't need these mitochondria anymore. And you'll slowly start to lose them. So again, inactivity bad, exercise good. Again, that's generally true for pretty much everything. But again, when it comes to mitochondria, exercise is its friend, because again, exercise is mitochondria is one of the things that helps you exercise, and exercise for a longer time and a greater intensity. The more mitochondria you got, the more energy you can make, and the longer you can exercise. So mitochondria, very, very interesting aspect of biology and exercise, which again, I think people probably don't give enough attention to. Now, the third aspect of exercise that I think people may not be giving a lot of attention to or think of too much is your immune system. It has been known for well over 120, 30, 40 years that exercise can have both a good and not so good effect on the immune system. Again, the original studies go back well over 100 years, where a doctor essentially noticed that, kids that were outside and exercising an awful lot got more colds and flus than kids who exercised less. And studies since then have found similar effects of exercise. When you, for instance, run a marathon, for instance, and 26 miles, turns out you're more likely to get sick about a week later than people who exercise more moderately. So grueling, long duration events of exercise, not so great on your immune system. But if you're getting to the gym or exercising your own a few days a week, 2, 3, 4 days a week for maybe an hour a day or something like that, your immune system is stronger and more resilient. One of the studies that I will always remember, I read this study in college. It actually looked at people who were training for the 1987 Los Angeles Marathon. And they compared people who ran the marathon to those people who trained for the marathon, but they never made it. Their car broke down, their kids were sick, whatever. They never made it to the marathon. And the researchers actually looked at these two distinct groups. They were both highly fit people. And they noted that the people who ran the marathon were more likely to get sick about a week later. The people who trained for the marathon but never made it did not get sick a week later. Very interesting that, training for the marathon, again, very good for the immune system, but when you actually run the marathon, that grueling event, that seems to have a debilitating effect on immunity. So very, very interesting duality effect of exercise on the immune system. So if you're looking to stay healthy, I would say, again, this is basically what the researcher said in that study I was just quoting, train as if you're going to run a marathon, but never run it. I wouldn't necessarily say say that, it was a cute way of ending the study, but it is proof that regular exercise bolsters the immune system. Doesn't mean you can't run marathons. If you want to do it, that's great. Just realize that you may get sick a week later, due to a temporary drop in your immune system. It's going to rebound. It's going to build back up, so you have nothing to worry about. Your body is very plastic, if you will. It bends and it goes back to its normal routine, its normal structure, its homeostasis, if you will. Homeostasis is fancy talk for everything's in balance, okay? And the immune system is very good at that as well. So again, one of the reasons we know that exercise helps reduce the effects of cancer, for instance, appears to be that the immune system is stronger in people who exercise. And when you see, say, an aberrant cancer cell, your immune system goes over and beats it up before it can do any damage. So immunity, very interesting aspect of exercise that, again, I think a lot of people are not giving any attention to, at least not as much as they should. Again, very, very interesting. And again, just like before, when we were talking about the mitochondria, it doesn't take a lot of exercise to see favorable changes. There have been studies that have looked at literally one exercise session. One exercise session has been shown to have an immune-enhancing effect. Even some of these studies have actually looked at how exercise can enhance certain vaccine responses, makes them work better. So exercise, again, you can't go wrong with it. The fourth thing I want to talk about in this episode is something you probably have heard of before, and that's that exercise can help people who have type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is the most common form of diabetes in America and most other developed nations, and it's a condition where essentially you make insulin, but you're not using it very well. The insulin, you are, for instance, what they sometimes called insulin resistant. The insulin receptor on the outside of your cells, there's not as many of them for the insulin to attach to, and because of that, you cannot lower blood sugar as effective. Now, turns out that exercise is very good at helping insulin resistance, because when you are exercising regularly, your body starts to put those receptors back out on the surface of the cells again, where the insulin can latch onto them. In doing so, the insulin becomes much more effective at lowering blood sugar. And then not only that, but you have other ways that you can use to lower blood sugar that are even not dependent on insulin, and they become more active as well. And when it comes to diabetes, I like to say that, because most people have type 2 diabetes, and that's a condition that people get when they usually eat too many calories and they usually are not exercising enough. So if you do the opposite, for instance, if you exercise a little bit more and maybe eat a few calories less, the type 2 diabetes many times goes away. I don't mind using the C word, the cure word, when it comes to this, because I have seen people get off of medications. I actually know someone who, reversed his type 2 diabetes from a wheelchair. And so I do know this is possible. Is it easy? No, it's not easy, but I know it can help. And I know I'm getting on a sidebar here, but I do think that's important for people with type 2 diabetes to realize. You may have not heard that before. Type 2 diabetes is not something everybody has to get. And when you do get it, it is possible in many cases to get off those medications. Again, you do it in conjunction with your doctor, and eating better and exercising a little bit more or exercising some. And again, eventually your blood sugar starts to go down. Your hemoglobin A1C, your A1C as it's sometimes called, that's a measure of your long-term blood sugar levels. That also tends to go down as well. So if you're interested in this, I would say go tell your doctor, hey, I've heard that exercise and losing weight can help my type 2 diabetes. Is that true? And they'll probably tell you, yeah. And maybe every 3 or 4 months you'll go back, get another blood test, and they can get an idea by measuring not only your blood sugar but that hemoglobin A1C molecule, how your diabetes is progressing. So again, something to think about. Exercise absolutely can help improve insulin function, help it work better, and long story short, this can go a long way to helping people manage their diabetes and maybe even in some cases getting off their medications. So the fifth thing to talk about in this episode is your good cholesterol levels, your HDL. HDL is fancy talk for high-density lipoprotein. High-density lipoprotein, we know it better as HDL, not to be confused with bad cholesterol, LDL. Easy way to remember to tell the difference, think H for happy, L for lousy. You want to have a lot of HDL, generally speaking, and not a lot of LDL. So, but when it comes to HDL, there's not a lot of medications which will raise it. And it's called good because what it does is it removes cholesterol, excess cholesterol from the blood, takes it back to the liver where you recycle it. And so generally speaking, the higher the HDL, the better we are at removing cholesterol from our blood. And this in turn can help lower our risks of heart disease and heart attacks and stuff like that. Well, it turns out that HDL is more complicated than what we might normally think. Like the simple thing, what I just told you about removing cholesterol, HDL is more complicated. For instance, we know, that HDL, good cholesterol, has an antioxidant property to it. That's right. HDL seems to be very good at mopping up free radicals, which can contribute to different diseases. Another thing that HDL seems to be able to do is lower inflammation. HDL appears to have an anti-inflammatory property. And so it is much more complicated than simply it removes excess cholesterol. It does other things. And in terms of raising HDL, exercise is one of the few things in the world that'll actually raise it. There are not many medications that will raise HDL. There's just not a lot out there. But exercise will do this. Over the years, HDL has been getting less attention for heart disease than, say, LDL. A lot of the drugs people may take for heart disease is directed to lowering the bad cholesterol, the LDL, not so much raising the HDL. And I wonder about that because, I think I understand why that might be because there is some people out there, for instance, who make an awful lot of HDL. Their HDLs are off the chart, but yet they still get heart disease and heart attacks. How is it that their HDL is so high they still have problems? Well, it could be that the HDL that they're making isn't working so well, and so their body overcompensates by making more HDL. That's a possibility. Another thing to consider is it possible that it's not just your level of HDL, but the quality of HDL that matters. So it could be that maybe you're making a lot of HDL, but it's a low quality HDL. Now, what do I mean by low quality? Well, again, like all things biology, it's complicated, but I would point out that there are different types of HDL. There's different, what they call subfractions, different types, two different flavors, if you will. And the two main flavors or types of HDL, they go by HDL2 and HDL3. HDL2 and HDL3. These are two major types out there. HDL2 is a larger molecule. HDL3 is a somewhat smaller molecule. Generally, it's thought that we want to have lots of HDL2 and not a lot of HDL3. Generally. But I do think it's much more complicated than that. But the thing to realize with exercise is that it's very good at shuffling the combinations of HDL2 and HDL3 into its proper components. So if you have, say, lower quality HDL that may not be doing its job as effectively as we would want, simply exercising a little bit more can help us reshuffle the HDL and the HDL2 and the HDL3 such that they maybe start to become more quality and do their job better. Another thing that HDL appears to do, besides being antioxidant, is, again, I mentioned it is generally thought to be an anti-inflammatory compound. And we can see this because usually as HDL levels go up, inflammation goes down. We measure HDL by doing a special blood test called the CRP blood test. CRP stands for C, the letter C, reactive protein. And CRP is a blood test marker for total body inflammation level. The higher the CRP, the more the inflammation. As a rule, higher HDL, lower CRP, lower inflammation. But again, why is that important? Well, heart disease has an inflammatory component. So as the HDL starts to become more quality, does its job better, CRP levels go down, inflammatory markers go down, perhaps then also heart disease risk goes down as well. There was a study that I came across as I was prepping for this episode. A study was called Associations of Aerobic and Strength Exercise with Clinical Laboratory Test Values. This study caught my eye because it involved 80,000 people. That's a lot of people. That's much more than most exercise studies out there. Essentially, this study comes to this conclusion. In both men and women, the more days per week they did either aerobic exercise or strength training, this was associated with lots of good stuff, such as lower levels of blood sugar, lower levels of that hemoglobin A1C molecule, lower LDL, lower total cholesterol, lower triglycerides. Their kidneys worked better. That CRP level went down. Their livers functioned better. And again, they had higher levels of HDL levels as well. So again, exercise, if you want to do it, that's great. I think it's wonderful. It doesn't appear to matter whether you're strength training or whether you're doing aerobic exercise. Both of these types of modalities of exercise appear to play a role in our overall health for a variety of reasons, not only raising HDL, but doing all kinds of good stuff as in addition to that. But again, if you've got low levels of HDL, you notice that on a blood test, doctors always measure HDL, and you're thinking to yourself, how can I raise it? One way is, exercise. Again, strength training is great. Aerobic exercise is great. I say do them both because they're both great. It's like peanut butter and jelly. They both go very well together. And again, when you're exercising regularly, your HDL level will go up, but not only the total HDL, but those subfractions will improve as well. The HDL2, the HDL3, the ratios of those cholesterol subfractions will also start to align better. And this is another way in which HDL can help keep us healthy. All right, so enough about HDL. Let's go to number 6. Number 6 in my list of top 9 little-known aspects of exercise involves a compound which you may have heard of, maybe not. It's called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a gas, and it is made in the body predominantly in our blood vessels. Our blood vessels have a little lining on the inside called the endothelium, and the endothelium is where nitric oxide is made. One of the things we do is we take an amino acid called arginine, and we convert it into nitric oxide. And the nitric oxide does several things, and one of the things that many people are aware of is that it relaxes the muscles in our blood vessels. And by relaxing those muscles, the blood vessels expand, they open up. This is called vasodilation. Vasodilation is fancy talk for the muscles of our blood vessels relax and our blood vessels expand. They dilate. And this can allow more blood and oxygen to get to the muscles and help us remove, things like lactic acid and carbon dioxide, which may hinder exercise performance. And you may have heard of nitric oxide before because there are some supplements out there that are touted to raise nitric oxide levels. They often contain, for instance, arginine and its partner in crime, citrulline. Citrulline is another amino acid. What does it do? Citrulline helps us make arginine. And so the idea here is if I load you up with citrulline, it'll help you make arginine, and arginine in turn will help you make nitric oxide. All right, that's the rationale behind those supplements. To be honest with you, you don't need any supplement to make nitric oxide. Go take a walk, start lifting weights, get on an elliptical, start swimming, hiking, biking. Exercise naturally raises nitric oxide levels, and this is one of the ways in which it can help our blood vessels stay healthy. Now, I put a lot of emphasis on the endothelium, the blood vessels, because that's really where we kind of hear about nitric oxide a lot, how it helps our blood vessels stay healthy. But I want you to know that other cells of the body can make nitric oxide too. For instance, your immune system. There are cells in your immune system that make nitric oxide. Why do they do that? The nitric oxide, when it's made by the immune system, helps you battle infections. That nitric oxide actually generates free radicals, and those free radicals then can battle bacteria and viruses to help you battle them off. So, and again, notice what I said there. The nitric oxide acts like a free radical producer, and it destroys the invading bacteria, for instance. And we've all heard that, for instance, free radicals are bad guys. They do bad things. Turns out our body can use free radicals in certain circumstances to our benefit, and this is one of those ways. Nitric oxide can be made in the immune cells, and those immune cells then use the nitric oxide to battle foreign invaders. And related to that, another reason that we make nitric oxide, again, gets a little more deeper than this, is that nitric oxide can act as a signaling molecule. It helps cells talk to each other. We got trillions of cells in our body. They got to know what each other's doing to keep us healthy, and they do it they communicate in different ways. One of the ways they do this is by using nitric oxide. It acts as a signaling molecule. It helps, for instance, our immune system and our nervous system stay healthy and talk to each other. So nitric oxide is much more complicated than simply, expanding blood vessels. That's a great thing, but it does a lot more things as well. Now, if we leave nitric oxide alone, we go to number 7. Number 7 is kind of related to that, and that's blood vessel health. We have a lot of blood vessels in the body. As I often say in class, adult humans have about 100,000 miles of blood vessels in their body. That's a lot. We are incredibly complicated creatures, but for our blood vessels to stay healthy, they need nitric oxide, yes, but exercise also helps this as well. And while exercise helps us make nitric oxide, and that can also help our blood vessels stay healthy, one of the neatest things that exercise does is it'll promote the formation of new blood vessels. You can actually grow blood vessels. And this is really a really neat thing that the body does. The technical term for the growing of new blood vessels is angiogenesis. Angiogenesis. Angio means blood vessels. Genesis means the creation of. So angiogenesis is the formation of blood vessels. I think that this is something a lot of people don't really think about too much. We take our blood vessels for granted, but we're only as healthy as our blood vessels at the end of the day. Sometimes, for instance, I will work in a capacity as a personal trainer, and I'll over the years, I've worked with several people who maybe be older, and they will tell me sometimes that when they walk for, a few minutes, their calves start to hurt, their legs start to hurt, and the hurting, it increases over time, and they eventually have to sit down and they can't walk anymore. Well, that symptom that I'm talking about right now is a sign of heart disease, and it's called peripheral artery disease, peripheral vascular disease. It's blood vessel disease. Over the time, the blood vessels in people with heart disease essentially get clogged with plaque, and the blood can't get through those clogged up areas very well, and so when they start to put stress on their muscles, the muscles contract. That further blocks the blood supply to the muscle, and you start getting burning sensation in your legs due to a buildup of lactic acid. Well, one of the things that people will advocate who have this disorder is, in addition to staying in contact with their doctor and maybe taking some medications, is they should be exercising more. In the beginning, depending on how bad this is, these people may not be able to walk on treadmills or walk per se, and that's why I think maybe something like a recumbent bike where you're sitting on a bike and you're pedaling can come into handy, because that is aerobic exercise as well. And when you are exercising regularly, especially aerobic exercise, that puts a stress on the body. The body responds to that stress in many different ways, and one of the ways is that it causes the body to eventually start growing new blood vessels. These blood vessels are like new highway networks. They allow the blood to get to where it's got to get to by bypassing those clogged up blood vessels. So you actually have new highway networks of blood vessels being created. And it's not just in the legs I'm talking about. These new blood vessels are formed everywhere, including the heart. So again, I'm sure anybody who's had heart disease, their doctor has most likely told them about the benefits of exercise, especially if they've ever been in a cardiac rehab unit after maybe having a heart attack or something like that. Exercise is a powerful medication, and it does improve blood vessel growth. You can make new blood vessels, new highway networks to carry blood to the muscles it's got to get to and help you remove waste products faster. And again, at the end of the day, it's going to take some time for this to work. It may take several months or a year to grow significant blood vessels, but at the end of the day, people who suddenly couldn't walk for more than a minute or two are now walking for 10 minutes maybe. And so now they can do more stuff. They can take care of their grandkids. They can go shopping, and now the quality of their life is improved. This is the power of exercise. It does so many amazing things that, again, I don't see anybody talking about this on television or on the news, etc. But I think this is a message that needs to get out to the American people as well as the world community, that exercise can literally grow new blood vessels, and this can have a profound effect on not only our health, but the quality of our life as well. So again, blood vessel, very, very sexy. Equally as sexy, dementia. There is evidence that exercise can improve memory in people who are in the beginning stages of dementia, and that does include even Alzheimer's disease. A study came out a while ago. It was called Aerobic Exercise for Alzheimer's Disease, a randomized controlled pilot trial. This was 76 older adults who likely had Alzheimer's disease. They had all the telltale signs, and they had these older adults essentially do 150 minutes of aerobic exercise per week for 26 weeks. 150 minutes of exercise is the minimum requirement for adults. That's essentially 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. And they did this for 26 weeks, so they exercised for essentially 6 months. And these researchers find that exercise causes gains in aerobic fitness, no surprise there, and were associated with improved memory performance and reduced atrophy of a certain part of their brain called the hippocampus. The hippocampus is involved in formation of new memories. So not only did their aerobic fitness improve, which was to be expected, but their memory seems to get better, and their parts of their brain associated with memory seem to shrink less. That is very important. Again, it's a pilot trial, so we got to see larger studies to see what how well this might work. Again, I do think it depends on the severity of dementia, the severity of Alzheimer's disease. This study looked at people who were most likely in the beginning stages of it. They were not most likely confined to nursing homes, etc. They still had a lot of their memory, but again, in people who are trying to hold on to their memory, exercise appears to have a profound effect on memory. As I often say to people, always remember this rule of thumb. There is an intimate relationship between heart health and brain health. What's good for your heart generally is going to be good for your brain as well. So again, we're always talking about the heart disease and how devastating that is. I got to tell you, memory deficits, dementia, it is a life sucker as well. I unfortunately remember the day when my grandmother was about 102 years old, and she looked at a picture and she didn't recognize some of her granddaughters. And that was a real blow. I mean, my grandmother, even after, over 100, her mind was like a steel trap. That woman remembered the Titanic sinking like it was yesterday. I'm not kidding. My grandmother lived to 104, but around 103, I think, maybe 102, she started to lose her memory. And that, again, she wasn't moving like she was moving before. She wasn't exercising as much. And again, that can definitely play a role in memory deficits. So again, if you're trying to hold on to your memory, I think exercise is one of the simplest ways to do it. The earlier we start, the better. But in this study, even people who were older, who had the beginning signs of Alzheimer's disease, even in those individuals, exercise appeared to help their memory and their brains. So again, very, very interesting. This is, I think, concerning that America is a nation that's growing older. The average person in America, right now is about 39 years old, and the biggest growing segment of the older population is people over the age of 85. People in America are living longer. Unfortunately, the quality of their life as they get older is not as great, unfortunately. A lot of them end up in nursing homes. And again, for many reasons, some of them may be, having memory issues, but again, some other people may be in nursing homes because they can no longer take care of themselves anymore. Sidebar, again, I like doing sidebars. It is interesting to note that half the people in nursing homes are over the age of 85. Only 1% of people over the age of 85 do any kind of resistance training. I don't think that is a coincidence. I think many people are in nursing homes because they can't take care of themselves anymore. They can't get out of a chair. They can't get off a toilet. They can't get off the floor if they fall down and can't get up. We've all heard that phrase before. So again, strength training important as well. The research on exercise and memory is probably going to explode over the next couple of years as we move forward. But again, I want you to realize that strength training is important too. It helps our muscles stay strong as we get older, and also aerobic exercise in particular appears to have a very powerful effect on memory enhancement and keeping your memory as you get older, and maybe even preventing some atrophy of brain tissue. Along the same lines of dementia is the next topic I want to talk about, which I think that the topic that most people have never heard of before. And I usually talk about this study in classes I teach. I find it very interesting. Exercise can help you live longer. And I'm just going to say it like that. In the past, I used to say, well, exercise, it can help your quality of life, but it may not help the quantity of your life. Study comes out in 2011. It was published in a very prestigious journal called The Lancet. This was no small study. It involved over 400,000 people in Taiwan. They have essentially took these people and they split up into different groups. They had the people who were really active and they ran, and then other people jogged. They had the people who didn't exercise at all, and then they had the people who walked. And they follow them for several years and they crank out some statistics, and they come to the conclusion that, again, this conclusion is something that I'm shocked nobody's talking about more than they are. 15 minutes of walking a day, that's it, 15 minutes a day of walking reduced all-cause mortality by 14%. What does that mean? The risk of dying from everything dropped by 14% if you only exercise 15 minutes a day. That's it. So exercise reduces the risk of dying from everything: heart disease, cancer, diabetes, strokes, dementia, you name it. And it was statistically significant at only 15 minutes a day. That's profound. And again, it gets better than that. Every additional 15 minutes of daily exercise that people did further reduced the risk of dying by 4%, and all cause cancer by 1%. And this is true in both men and women. So every 15 minutes can provide people with gigantic reductions in the risk of dying from everything. This is huge, and I'm shocked that people don't talk about this enough. This study, again, came out a long time ago. It made a little bit of waves when it first came out, and then nobody talked about it after that. Again, that's another reason why I wanted to talk about it. We have within our grasp a powerful medication which exerts a wide spectrum of effects in the body to retard disease and help us live a longer life. And why in the world, again, I'm going to sidebar again, why in the world more people aren't talking about this? I don't get it. I don't understand why there are not TV commercials on this. We see these now TV commercials where they try to, get you to be nice to people. Where are the TV commercials that say, go out and take a walk? Where are the billboards? Where is the war on disease of exercise? I hear that we're going to have a war on cancer. We've been talking about the war of cancer for decades. We haven't won it. The war on cancer will not be found in a laboratory. The war on cancer is found in the kitchen and in the gym. Exercise, eating well, will reduce a myriad of health disorders. Why nobody is talking about this, I do not know. If I won the lottery, believe me, I'd be doing billboards, TV commercials, etc. You'll know when I win the lottery, because that's when those TV commercials, billboards, and radio commercials start going on. But until then, I got a podcast where I can talk about it. So again, I digress, but again, I get very, very, very passionate when I talk about this topic, because again, people look for answers in a pill, and sometimes you can find that answer in a pill or a shot, and many times you can't. And unfortunately, some of these pills and shots cost a lot of money. Exercise is free. We have within our grasp a free and powerful medication which can do a lot of cool stuff. And again, I think that's a message that, people should be shouting from the rooftops, because this is a very important message that I think needs to get out to people. Okay, so those are my 9 little-known exercise benefits. I hope you found them as interesting as I did as I was talking about them. I want to end this week's episode a little differently than I have previously. At the end of every episode, I like to talk about, go out and make a difference. And I do that because I think when we go out and we make a difference in the lives of other people, that provides ripples that go through society, and you just don't know where that is going to lead to. And I tell you that because I want to basically talk for a moment about a loss that I had in my family recently. It only happened about a week ago. On September 28th, I learned of the passing of a family member named Bob Fox. Now, to me, I called him Pops. But he was not my father. He was actually the father of my brother Joe. Yes, I do have a brother Joe. And Pops was he was my mom's first husband. And I never knew him until about 20 years ago. And over the years, I came to love him as a dad. He was a very fascinating guy. He was a World War II and Korea vet. He was in the military for over 20 years. He was a letter carrier for over 20 years. And over the course of my time with him, he told me some amazing stories of his life. This is a man who absolutely made a difference. When he was a letter carrier, he saved someone's life. And when he was in the military, one of the stories that usually people remember him telling us is that after World War II, he was in his unit were in charge of, unfortunately helping the Russians round up some Russian deserters and taking them back to Russia. And the Russians were not going to be too kind to these people. And I'll leave that to your imagination for what they were going to do to the deserters. Well, they were going to ship them on boxcars and send them back to Russia. And Pops comes across a little boy who is about 12 years old. And he was not going to allow this little boy to be sent back to Russia. And so he basically tells the boy to run as fast as he can and don't look back. We never know what became of that little boy. I sometimes think that this little story of his would make an excellent movie with Tom Hanks, because we just don't know whatever became of that little boy. But bottom line, he put his life in danger, because when the Russians found out that little boy was not there, they literally put a gun to his head and were going to shoot him. And then fortunately for him, it was an American captain on, at the scene, and he pointed his gun at the Russians. And long story short, Pop lived to 92 years of age. And that's a story that rings true with a lot of members of my family, because, he literally put his life on the line to save a little boy after World War II. And that is an amazing story in of itself. You'll never hear about that story on the History Channel. For me, the thing that stands out to me the most was 20 years ago. Those of you who know me may know that my mom and my dad died 20 years ago, less than 3 months from each other. They both had cancer. Ironically, my mom and dad were also divorced, and they died less than 3 months from each other. But after my mom died, I wrote a letter to Pops, and I told him what happened. I thought he should know, since he was married to her first. And he wrote me back, and he did what I was never expecting. He said, I appreciate you telling me your mom has passed away. I'm very sorry. Tell me what the funeral costs and I will pay for it. Oh my goodness. I had never heard of anybody doing anything like that before for anybody. Again, he had not seen my mom in over 40 years, had no contact with her, and yet he literally just wrote a check. And that made such an impression on me. He didn't owe me anything. He didn't know me from anybody. But to do that for my mom was such an amazing act of kindness. I know my mom would be so surprised and happy that he did that for me. And since then, over the time, over the last 20 years, I've been able to spend with him. We've, gotten to know each other very well, and loved him like a dad. When I would go down to Virginia to hang out with my nieces and nephews and my brother, he was living with my brother and sister-in-law, so we got to spend a lot of time together. And fortunately, we liked a lot of the same TV shows. We liked to watch Ancient Aliens and The Curse of Oak Island and even professional wrestling. So we had a lot of fun together. We'd go out to lunch and go out to dinner with each other, and it was just so much fun. So his passing was very sad to me, and I thought I would just bring him out to you because I didn't talk about it online. If you follow me on social media, I didn't bring it up on Facebook or Instagram, etc. Others had. It was kind of hard for me to talk about, but I wanted to bring him out because he's not someone who was ever on television, and or nobody wrote about him in newspapers, or no books written about him. But he definitely made a difference in his life. And I think that is the best testament to a life well spent, to be able to say that you lived your life and you made a difference, and other people are the better for knowing you. I can think of no other better way to remember someone than that. And so I just wanted to bring his life and his exploits to your attention, to let you know that there are people out there who literally did make a difference. And Bob Fox was definitely someone who made a difference in my life. And so hopefully you take something of substance from this. I appreciate you letting me ramble on about this. I normally like to, stick to the facts, but, this has been a little bit of a catharsis for me to talk about it for the very first time. And in any event, this is also my testament to him, because he was a great guy. So I'll leave you with that, and also then leave you with the quote of the day, which comes from Benjamin Franklin, who said, "Well done is better than well said." And for Bob Fox, he definitely did well done. Until next time, I'm Joe Cannon. Take care.